For progressive MS, I think the next thing clearly is discussing results with regulatory bodies in the world. So like most prominently FDA and EMA. So we will definitely work on submission of a breakthrough designation application. We will ask for end of phase 2 meetings with the FDA and also with the EMA. So these are things we are doing, we're preparing.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. Joining me is Immunic CEO, Dr. Daniel Vitt. Daniel, very good to speak with you. Last week, you published the top-line phase 2 data from your CALLIPER trial of Vidofludimus calcium in progressive forms of multiple sclerosis. Before we jump into the actual results, please remind us what the objective of the trial was. What were you planning to achieve?
Yeah, I think and thank you for having us here today and for the questions here. But what the purpose of the study was really to confirm and present data underlining the neuroprotective properties of Vidofludimus calcium in patients with progressive MS. And specifically to understand what is the effect size on disability protection, and to guide therefore statistical assumption for a future phase 3 study of the molecule. So really to learn to what extent can we reduce progression in progressive MS patients as the most important clinical measurement in progressive MS patients.
Going into the trial results, were you able to see this from the top-line data? What were the key clinical outcomes, specifically looking at clinical disability progression?
Yeah, I think overall, a 20% reduction of disability progression is a huge success. And interestingly, in this subgroup of patients with primary progressive MS, we have even achieved a 30% reduction of disability worsening. That's amazing. I think nothing you usually expect. And comparing this also with historic data of other studies, it looks pretty strong. So numerically, I think so far the best data point reported. We think that underlines the unique mode of action and the game-changing potential for Vidofludimus calcium in progressive MS, but beyond as well.
You also investigated MRI endpoints in the trial. Please tell us more about that.
Yeah, MRI is a diagnostic tool to quantify changes and visualize changes, for example, in the size of compartments. And it was always thought to correlate between clinical endpoints and what you can measure in MRI. I think what we learned today is, and this is part of our data readout, that you see a wonderful effect and a 20% reduction on thalamus atrophy. And the thalamus is a part of the brain and more relevant for disability and recently shown to correlate with a 5-year disability progression. Whereas whole brain atrophy is just the whole brain and therefore numerically less important. And we have seen a modest 5% reduction on the whole brain endpoint, which makes sense if you look on the thalamus volume.
In previous trials, Vidofludimus calcium has shown a favorable safety and tolerability profile. What does the new data tell us?
The new data tells us there is no real new data. There's no change in what we have observed so far. It is one of the big strengths of Vidofludimus calcium that it has this wonderful safety and tolerability profile demonstrated in all the clinical trials so far. And meanwhile, we have treated more than 2,500 individuals with the drug. So a very benign profile observed so far. And this study just underlines what we have observed so far in the studies we published up to now.
Daniel, what are the next steps for Vidofludimus calcium in this indication in progressive MS?
Well, there are several things ongoing. We should not forget that we have the phase 3 study in relapsing MS ongoing, which is expected to be completed next year. So that's another thing. And also patients with relapsing MS are benefiting from the data we have revealed last week because disability worsening, which is not related to relapses, is also important for MS patients. So that's an important piece. So that would directly fuel into the positioning and into the clinical benefit we expect for Vidofludimus calcium in relapsing MS patients. For progressive MS, I think the next thing clearly is discussing results with regulatory bodies in the world. So like most prominently FDA and EMA. So we will definitely work on submission of a breakthrough designation application. We will ask for end of phase 2 meetings with the FDA and also with the EMA. So these are things we are doing. We're preparing, working on the protocol for a potential phase 3 study. But also an important point is that we think that this data set is certainly making vidofludimus calcium a very well differentiated, attractive, multi-billion opportunity. And therefore, this is a basis of a lot of discussions with potential pharma partners around the globe, in the US, in Europe, global companies. So this is an exciting time for the company. But also we're looking on more or less several ways forward for the asset.
Just finally, how does vidofludimus calcium fit into the treatment paradigm in progressive MS? What other drugs are available, and which benefits could your drug offer patients?
Yeah, that's maybe the most important piece. So what is new? What is different? And so far, there's only one drug approved. It's a wonderful drug, Ocrevus from Roche, is anti-CD20 antibody, and it's approved for PPMS, or primary progressive MS only. Interestingly, the strength of Ocrevus is really in those patients which are younger in age and have more inflammatory activity. That's why the label in Europe is more limited to these subset of patients. And that's not surprising because these B-cell depletion using anti-CD20 therapy is a smart way to lower the systemic inflammation. However, I think what we have seen with vidofludimus calcium is that specifically patients without this inflammation are benefiting even more. So in a subset of patients which had no gadolinium lesions at baseline, we see a 29% reduction of disability risk. And that's surprising, that's new, and that underlines that the drug works in a neuroprotective way and not just leverages anti-inflammatory properties for having an improvement on disability outcome. So I think it's a good news for patients that our drug specifically seems to work in those patients who so far could not benefit from current treatments.
Daniel, congratulations on those latest results. I hope you'll keep us updated on your ongoing trials.
Yeah, thank you.
That's Dr. Daniel Vitt, the CEO of Immunic.